In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro addresses a series of pressing and controversial topics, beginning with a violent shooting incident at a U.S. Border Patrol station in McAllen, Texas. The episode delves into the details of the attack, the political rhetoric surrounding immigration enforcement, the ongoing Texas flooding crisis, President Trump's renewed trade threats, and a contentious interview between Tucker Carlson and the president of Iran. Throughout, Shapiro offers his perspective on the political and social implications of these events, emphasizing the consequences of inflammatory language and the importance of discerning truth in today's complex media environment. The episode opens with a detailed account of a shooting at a Border Patrol facility in McAllen, Texas, where a 27-year-old man armed with multiple rifles and tactical gear opened fire on law enforcement officers. The suspect was killed after exchanging dozens of rounds with agents, and two officers were injured, one seriously. The man's vehicle bore spray-painted references to a left-wing anarchist group linked to a Call of Duty video game, suggesting a politically motivated attack. Shapiro highlights that the suspect's parents mentioned his mental health issues, a common factor in such violent incidents. Shapiro then contextualizes this shooting within a broader surge of attacks on ICE and Border Patrol agents, which have reportedly increased by as much as 700% since President Trump's administration began enforcing stricter border policies. He argues that the left-wing rhetoric demonizing ICE and Border Patrol agents as Nazis or Gestapo contributes to a permissive environment for violence, even if such rhetoric does not directly incite attacks. Shapiro stresses that while political figures are not responsible for the actions of unstable individuals, the heated language used by prominent Democrats and media personalities creates a dangerous atmosphere that can embolden extremists. He cites examples of inflammatory statements from Democratic leaders and commentators who equate immigration enforcement with cruelty and fascism, noting that such language undermines respect for law enforcement officers who are simply doing their jobs. Shapiro calls on Democrats to tone down their rhetoric and engage directly with Border Patrol agents to understand their role and humanity. He underscores that illegal border crossing is against the law and that those who oppose current immigration policies should seek legislative change rather than vilify the agents enforcing the law. Shapiro moves on to discuss a recent immigration raid in Los Angeles' MacArthur Park, a neighborhood known for its large immigrant population and gang activity, including MS-13 presence. Federal agents, accompanied by the National Guard, conducted the operation, which caused local residents, including children, to disperse. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass publicly condemned the raid, demanding that ICE leave the area immediately and framing the operation as inhumane and disruptive to children's activities. Shapiro criticizes Bass's response as performative and disconnected from the realities of crime and law enforcement in the area. He points out that sanctuary city policies like those in Los Angeles hinder cooperation with ICE, allowing criminal elements to flourish. The raid sparked protests and vandalism, with Governor Gavin Newsom condemning the federal action as cruel and politically motivated. Shapiro interprets these reactions as part of a broader Democratic strategy to portray immigration enforcement as the real crime, which he argues is both dangerous and politically self-defeating. He also highlights comments from House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who did not rule out calls to defund ICE, signaling a shift in Democratic policy that could have significant implications for border security and the midterm elections. Shapiro suggests that such positions only strengthen President Trump's political standing, as immigration enforcement remains a popular issue among many voters. Turning to the ongoing disaster in Texas caused by historic flooding, Shapiro critiques the left-wing media's narrative blaming alleged budget cuts to the National Weather Service and other federal agencies for the tragedy. He argues that these claims lack evidence and amount to bad journalism, noting that the National Weather Service offices in the affected areas were reportedly fully staffed and capable of issuing timely warnings. Shapiro emphasizes that the flooding was a once-in-a-century natural disaster and that the administration is actively providing aid to affected families. He also addresses a racially charged controversy surrounding media coverage of a predominantly white Christian girls' camp affected by the floods. A former Houston official claimed the camp received disproportionate attention because of its racial makeup, a claim Shapiro disputes as false and divisive. He warns against allowing race-based narratives to distort the facts and fuel political polarization during times of crisis. Shapiro then analyzes President Trump's renewed threats to impose tariffs on a range of countries, including South Korea, Japan, and several Southeast Asian nations. He explains that the tariffs, set to take effect on August 1st, are part of a final push to pressure these countries into negotiating better trade terms with the United States. However, Shapiro points out that the actual average tariff rates these countries impose on American goods are quite low, often around 1%, and that non-tariff barriers, such as regulatory standards, are also relatively modest. He argues that imposing high tariffs on key allies like Japan and South Korea could be counterproductive, potentially pushing them closer to China economically and strategically. Shapiro expects that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will broker deals to avoid the full implementation of these tariffs, balancing President Trump's desire for better trade terms with the need to maintain strong alliances in the Indo-Pacific region. Shapiro also discusses the lack of any major new revelations from the Jeffrey Epstein case. He references journalist Michael Tracy's analysis, which casts doubt on the credibility of key accusers and the existence of a comprehensive Epstein list implicating powerful individuals. Shapiro notes that despite widespread speculation and conspiracy theories, no substantial evidence has emerged to support claims of a vast trafficking network involving prominent figures. He criticizes the tendency of social media and certain media personalities to amplify unsubstantiated theories, which ultimately undermine legitimate investigations and public trust. Shapiro also defends the Trump administration's handling of the case, pointing out that if there had been credible evidence implicating Donald Trump or his associates, it would have been publicized by now. He warns against the dangers of unfalsifiable conspiracy theories that persist despite contradictory evidence, arguing that such beliefs often serve as excuses for personal grievances and political anger rather than genuine pursuit of truth. In the final segment, Shapiro critiques Tucker Carlson's recent interview with Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian. He contrasts Carlson's adversarial style in previous interviews, such as with Senator Ted Cruz, with the notably soft and unchallenging approach he took with the Iranian leader. Shapiro highlights that Carlson openly admitted he was not seeking the absolute truth in the interview and avoided pressing Pezeshkian on critical issues like Iran's nuclear program and hostile actions toward the United States. Pezeshkian's claims that Iran does not seek nuclear weapons, that the IAEA has full access to Iranian facilities, and that death to America is merely a figure of speech when unchallenged. Shapiro points out the factual inaccuracies in these statements, including Iran's enrichment of uranium to weapons-grade levels and its support for militias responsible for killing American soldiers. He contrasts this with President Trump's clear stance on Iran as a hostile actor and the need to continue supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression. Shapiro suggests that Carlson's approach reflects a broader worldview that is sympathetic to regimes antagonistic to the U.S., and he urges listeners to critically evaluate the motivations behind such interviews. He concludes by emphasizing the importance of maintaining a strong filter for information consumption in an era of abundant and often conflicting narratives.